Hi, I'm Tyron Hyde, the CEO of Washington Brown, and welcome to my new podcast series called 10 with Ty. If you want to learn what this podcast series is about, there's an introductory podcast you can download from all good streaming services. I'd like to dedicate this podcast to Sonny Dave, who was an editor who died during the making of this podcast. Rest in peace, Sonny Dave. I miss you. Welcome to the first episode of 10 with Ty. I'm very excited about this project that I'm launching into. And then my special guest tonight, the first guest I have, is Steve Palise from Palise Property. Steve's actually written 2 books.
Hey, he's got copies of them. That's awesome.
I do actually have them. Residential Property Investing Explained and Commercial Property Investing Explained. So what I like about Steve is not just a residential property buyer, he's also a commercial property buyer. And if you ask me, the commercial property buying space is a lot more technical. So it is that next level. Now, before we get into the 10 with Ty questions, Steve, just a little bit of background about yourself. I believe you're in London. You're about to have a baby. Is that right?
28th, so it's coming pretty soon. What are we at? April 5th at the moment, so what's that, 7 weeks away?
How exciting. You're in London. You're buying properties all around Australia. What's that been? How's that been for business? How have you managed that, etc.?
Surprisingly, it's actually helped my business. So I actually came over here with the premise of just like probably taking on less clients, but just enjoying myself a little bit. But I've actually opened up another window of chatting with people. So like normally when you do the 9 to 5 and you play phone tag with the clients because they're busy at work and things like that, I'm now available from 2 p.m. till midnight. So anytime I offer people 2 p.m. till midnight, they actually choose 5, 6, 7, 8 p.m. because they want to get at home, have their partner on the phone or put the kids down or have a bit of a chat later. So it's all open up another window of chatting to people, which is really, really cool. The other benefit is it's actually forced me to run my business like a business. Where in Sydney, I was running around with a chicken with my head cut off. Now I actually have to trust my employees and have firm structures in place to kind of get it moving. So it's weirdly enough, it's actually improved my business. We're growing. Like the last year, we've got 10 staff now. So it's doing really well. And again, it's part of that having good like systems, processes and things like that.
Well, I can certainly relate to that, Steve. As you know, my wife and I went to Bali and lived in Bali for a couple of years before COVID. If you ask me, one of the true tests of running a business is if you can run it remotely. When I was about 22, I was a seminar junkie. And I just saw a guy one time by the name of Brad Sugars. And he was on stage. He started that Action International coaching franchise business. He said something like, if you've got to go to your job or your business, if you've got to go to your business every day at 6 o'clock in the morning, get home at 7 o'clock at night, you don't have a business, you've got a job. You know it's a job, right?
It's even worse, Tyron, because what happens is you actually can't have a holiday because you have to turn up. Like, absolutely. I remember when I first started, like you go on holidays, but you still have to check your phone every 2 hours just to kind of keep the wheels moving. So yeah, like you said, but carry on.
And so what I'm doing with this podcast is, because I've done pretty well over the years and I'm hoping to leave something for my daughter. A book that, I'm going to go around and ask the smartest people I know. These 10 questions. The 10 questions I'm going to ask you, Steve, are going to be timeless. They're not questions like, where would you buy now? They're a bit, hopefully, made you think a bit more. And so I just wonder, are you ready to play 10 with Ty, Steve?
Yeah, definitely. I love this concept as well, like I mentioned. Like I told my partner, and because obviously we're expecting a kid soon, like her straight away, her brain was like, that is a brilliant idea. I'm looking forward to it. So more excited than me running a business. She was more excited over this.
Oh, that's really sweet. Thank you for being encouraging, and thank you to your partner for being encouraging. I really appreciate it. Anyway, it's time to play 10 with Ty. You ready? Okay, let's. I've got a buzzer here I'm going to press.
Okay, question number 1, Steve. What has been your best investment?
All right, so my best one was my first property. So I bought a little house in Blacktown, which is just another suburb next to where I grew up in Wentworthville. Very low socioeconomic, but it was 230 grand. Like that was it. And this is in 2012. So it was my first one. It was all I could afford. I was like just out of university as an engineer and could just afford that. Got into the market. The reason why it was the best one for me was, firstly, I got into the market quickly. So like, markets grow long term. So like that was the springboard and the seed that let me kind of grow my whole portfolio because it went up from 230 to about 300 grand in the first year and a half. And I was just like, bloody hell, like that's like 5 years worth of working on the salary I'm on. And I've just made it from signing a piece of paper. So it was the big light bulb moment for me. It was just like got in early, stuck to the fundamentals, had a good outcome, and then that's where I've based my whole portfolio on.
And Steve, do you still own that property?
I actually still got it. I'm actually in the start. I probably should get rid of it. It's done its cycle. It's probably at the end of its cycle for now. But again, that nostalgia one, I like that. I'll probably keep it forever if I'm honest. I just like the sentiment of that's where it all started.
Question number 2. What has been your worst investment?
All right. So my worst investment was probably my best buy in quotation marks. So what I mean by that is, so I actually bought, I think it was number 3 in my portfolio. I bought an apartment in Cairns for $30,000. 1-bedroom apartment, $30,000, rented for $180 a week. So on paper, I'm like, it's brilliant. I've just got myself, end up being like $120 a week after you pay body corporate fees and stuff like that. So I've got myself $120 passive income per week from buying this. The reason why it was my worst buy was I had to pay cash for it. So actually at the time I had like a fairly new Subaru Liberty, which was my little kind of project car. And I remember finding that property. I looked at the car and went, sorry, car, you got to go. I've got this thing that could actually pay car repayments instead, and I could transition later. So I bought that, but because the banks wouldn't lend to it, I had to use cash. But I also wasn't at the end of my serviceability with the lending with banks. So I put about 35 grand into it because like stamp duty, legals, all that type of stuff. However, if I put that 35 grand into say like another Blacktown one, like my first one, and leveraged it to 200, 300 grand, now that would be worth 600, 700,000, and I would have made much bigger return. I'd have slightly less cash flow, but it's about leveraging for me. So it was the wrong property at the wrong time. I shouldn't have bought it. I didn't do badly for it, but I learned leverage is your friend. Like that's how you make the real money is you play with someone else's money and you leverage the dollars. It was just headache after headache after headache. However, I tell people I can put up with headaches if it's making you money. Like I get a lot of investors like, they want to get rid of a property because like, oh, it's always costing me maintenance, blah, blah, blah. But they might have made $200,000 from the property, but they're whinging about the $2,000 maintenance each year. And like, that's a small issue. But again, it was just, I should have leveraged. It was just wrong property, wrong time.
I think there's something to be said for not thinking that because the property is so low price that it's a good investment. One of my worst investments was property in the UK. Client came in and he was buying these properties for about £30,000 and getting a pretty good return. Like it was like 10% a lease. And I thought, it's good, I better get on this bandwagon. So I did. I used his buyer's agent up there and it was hopeless. The property was in the middle of nowhere. It's like, why did I do that? I just thought, on pen and paper, it looked good. But, I think there's something to be said, where some people say, oh, don't buy a property close to your home, go up. There's also something to be said about the fact that don't buy a property where you have no idea what the area's like. That was my lesson.
I had a friend do the exact same thing, but in America, he went and bought an Idaho, and like same thing, $30,000, $40,000 houses that you get good rent out of. But he's like, to collect the rent, you have to send someone around with a gun.
Can We Tie is brought to you by Washington Brown, the property depreciation expert.
Number 3, what has been the most valuable investment advice you've ever received?
All right, I like this question. Mine's probably no one becomes financially free from working. So what I mean by that is can't work on a per hour basis. You can't have to turn up at 7 and work till 7. Like that's not financially free. So you're either going to need a business that actually works for you, like you don't work in the business, or a salary job where you fund the investments that will make money while you sleep. So that's mine. No one becomes financially free from working.
My brother-in-law said to me when I was younger, he said, Ty, you'll never become rich working for someone else. And that makes sense to me. Yeah, sure, you could become the CEO of the NAB or Macquarie Bank, but really, what are the odds?
But again, you're still working for an hour, so you still got to put that money to something. Yes, they could probably save a huge nest egg and then retire and live off that nest egg and whittle it down, but they're still going to make smart investing decisions.
Now, I'm really curious about this question with you because, you've got the skill set of commercial and residential property. So what I want to know is what if you had your ideal portfolio mix, of commercial, property, residential, shares, crypto, whatever you're into, what would be your kind of ideal portfolio mix, Steve?
Yeah, so I'm obviously a property lover, but that's in my wheelhouse. That's where I've read hundreds of books on it, listen to all the podcasts. That's where my skill set is. It's not in those other ones like shares. Obviously, if I was an expert at shares, you can make a lot of money from that. But I obviously love property being the majority one in that kind of asset because it's tangible and it's a finite resource. So yes, you can buy shares that have a certain product at the finite resource, but they're not making any more land. We've all heard this before. So like we've literally had like wars over land for thousands of years. Like people want land. So if you can own a big portion of it, you're going to be all right long term. But to answer your question, like my probably perfect mix would be like have property as a background. So tangible necessity of life asset. The other one would be business, like we mentioned before, running a business and being able to effectively still make money while not being in the business. And then I'm not a huge fan of shares, like certain ones, yes, but most of the shares at the moment that do really well don't actually have a product. Like they're like Spotify's and Amazon's and stuff like that, where overnight could be bought out, switched, changed, new technology, etc. So I'd focus it on the tangible type of shares. And then the other one for me is probably owning a couple other types of businesses. So get like, I don't know, a dentist or some kind of necessity type businesses and have a mix that way as well. So that way all my eggs aren't in my own business.
Yeah, well, I tend to agree. Shares have a place, if you ask me. They have a place in my portfolio. Some of I wish I didn't. But, the one thing I believe in is investing in yourself. How much can you really change Commonwealth Bank's share price by opening a new account? But you can certainly change a property, add value to it. So, yeah, I guess invest in yourself would be one of my mottos.
I was going to say, that's one reason I like property as well. Once you bought it, you like, unless you're doing a value add, you're not checking it every day to see it's all right. Like you'll check it every 6 months to check the value. But I remember when I used to be an engineer, some of the guys there would have like $20,000 in shares and they'd be on it every day looking at the price.
You constantly can access how much it's moved that day, I'd be up all night. I couldn't sleep sometimes. I'd be waiting, what did the NASDAQ do today? Or sitting there on ComSec, refreshing. Like, what for?
Go educate yourself. And that's probably one of the things I find with shares is property people will educate themselves. I'll listen to thousands of podcasts, read books, read articles. Shares, they're not spending the same amount of hours. They kind of read an article here and there and they kind of do it. Or they trust someone to invest the money for them, which is also known. And I know I'm saying that effectively as a buyer's agent, but my general rule with real estate even is never trust anyone in real estate. Like educate yourself, pay for a service. If you want me to go find you a good property because you're time poor or you don't have the education, things like that, that's fine. But you must understand it. Otherwise, you're just trusting someone else with your wealth. Here's a quote for your daughter. No one cares about your financial future as much as yourself.
I love that. That's very true. No one will care about your financial future as much as yourself. Very true, Steve. Taylor, if you're watching this in the future, write that down. It's a very true statement. Anyway, question number 5, Steve. Let's say you're 20 years old, you've worked at Macca's for a couple of years and you've saved 20 grand. How would you advise yourself to invest that $20,000 today?
This is actually my favorite question because it's obviously was me when I was 20 years old and I actually had about 20, 25 grand for that first Blacktown property that I bought. So I'm going to answer this in two ways. So option one is if you can leverage that 20 grand and get a property that hits the fundamentals. So it's still got to have like affordability, population growth, good infrastructure, livability scores, et cetera, go into residential property, leverage up as much as you can, 80, 90%, get into something because you've got time on your side. You've got 45 years before official retirement, that is. So that's going to be fine long term. The other option, which is also something that I probably should have done as well, is don't buy a property, go start a business. So learn some life skills in terms of running a business, sales, making money. Like I don't care what it is, just go out and try to make $1. So put in some money and try to make $1 profit. Then once you've made $1 profit, try to make $10 profit and et cetera, et cetera. And like, don't be afraid to fail. Like if you lose $20,000, you're going to absorb that pretty quickly over the next 5 years with your salary increases and your job and things like that. So for me, I regret not starting a business sooner and becoming financially literate with running a business.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to fail. I like that. So this is probably the only question I think I have a definitive answer for, I think at the end of this, when I've done about 20, and I'm probably planning on doing one a month, so it'll be a while, I'll probably get my wife to interview me. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have the same answer for this one. So probably the one that I'm going to give away. So I reckon if I'd advise my daughter, 20 grand, she had 20 grand, to go and travel, to go overseas, go to Europe for a year and try and live on that $20,000 for 1 year without hassling your parents. upper money. I'm not saying that says she doesn't need the upper money.
You'll learn what your passion is as well. You'll start to like learn what things you like and don't like and see niches in markets. I did that, what you were saying, during university. So university, every 3-month holiday at the end. So I did a 5-year engineering degree. I went away so I've done now 50 plus countries, and I did it just in little 3-month stints. So I could still work and do university, go away. Again, obviously regret doing the gap years and stuff like that, but you got to draw the line somewhere.
All right, let's flip it. Let's say number 6. Let's flip it. So let's say you're 50 years old. Your both parents have sadly passed away, and you've been able to, and they've let you inherit it, say $500,000. How would you advise yourself to invest that money? Because we can't advise other people, not financial advice, but how would you advise yourself to invest that money as a 50-year-old, Steve?
Yeah, so I like this because it's juxtaposed to the 20-year-old where you've got lots of time on your side, where you've got the spare 45 years. You've ideally got like maybe 10, 15 years before you want to retire. So like you said, it's going to come down to your risk profile. Obviously, you've got less opportunity to make mistakes. If you make a mistake, there's less time to make it up. But if you're looking to build a passive income, I would leverage it into commercial property. But again, you've got to assess the risk for the individual kind of client. But I'd put it into a really low risk, like commercial property. So 500K, you can leverage that into about a 1.5 mil commercial. So either buy like a multi-tenancy kind of commercial, like a whole block of like warehouses or retail strip or something like that, or 3 little 600K ones or 2 750K ones, for instance. So you're diversifying the locations and assets. And then over the next 15 years, do a pay down strategy. So pay them off, be completely debt free when you're 65, and then you'll have about 100K passive income. So you can do the similar strategy with residential. However, it's a lot harder to pay off 15 years, and you won't have anywhere near the same passive income. You'll probably have a third to half the passive income. So you can choose the strategy based on kind of your risk profile.
I guess some people are scared of commercial property though, are they? There's not as much information about it out there, is there?
There wasn't information on it. Like I wrote my book because there was 0 books on the market. Like there was nothing, there was no commercial podcasts or articles. It was kind of left to the high net worth investors or business owners. But that's changed now. Like I've sold 10,000 of my books. So like people are getting well versed in commercial, which I think means like there'll be less risks in it because people are going to have the wool pulled over their eyes.
All right, let's move on. Question number 7, Steve. Let's say you find the DeLorean and you can go back in time and find your 20-year-old self, Steve. What would you tell yourself about investing that you're going to experience for the next 50 years? What would you tell yourself?
All right. So I've sort of alluded to it before, but time and leverage. Like you've got time on your side. Like you've got lots of years ahead. And when you're that age, it doesn't feel like you've got long. Like when you're 20, you're like, oh no, I'm going to be 30 soon. When you're 30, you're like, oh, I'm going to be 40 soon. And when you're 40, you're like, oh geez, retirement's not that far away. Like it is, you can achieve a lot. Like in the last 2.5 years, I wrote 2 books, started a business, moved overseas, hired 10 staff. Like you can actually achieve a lot in a short amount of time. So you've actually got truckloads of time. But then the second part, which I mentioned, is leverage. If you can use someone else's money to magnify your returns, that's bloody powerful. Like that is where the real wealth can kind of come from. However, like disclaimer, you can also magnify your losses though. So again, like we alluded to before, make sure you're well educated and your investment vehicle of choice is a low risk one as well. But one of the two I tell people for leverage and property here's another fun fact. In the last 30 years, every single residential property in each capital city has quadrupled in value. So if you've got 30 years on your side, you can quadruple your money, and you're not putting in that whole money though, because you leverage at 90%, 80%. You could like literally magnifying your things by 16 to 32 times.
That's a fun fact, all right. I've experienced where the reverse can happen in magnification or leverage, where especially with shares, because with shares you can borrow less as a ratio, but the share market can go down a lot quicker, and the banks can move a lot quicker, and what they call it, they margin call you, and it's scary. And sometimes you make really good investments in that way, but when everyone's snowballing, it's just you have to either put your money in or sell stocks. So that's something to be wary about with share investing and leverage, if you ask me, and I've experienced twice.
If you own an investment property, then Washington Brown can help you pay less tax with an ATO-compliant depreciation schedule. Visit washingtonbrown.com.au to pay less tax today.
Number 8, what legacy do you want to leave your family or your community, Steve?
Yeah, I find this question the hardest one to answer because there's no right answer. I can always answer which type of property is the best property or how to invest and things like that. So it's going to be person dependent. So for me, to be honest, I just want to be known as a nice guy who had a crack at experienced life. So like for me, like I enjoy travel. I enjoy like giving back. I like socializing, all that type of stuff. So I basically just want to like give to charity, work in the community, mentor some aspiring business owners, educate people on property because that's my wheelhouse. But then obviously got kids on the way. I just want to bring up kids with kind values. So that's the basis of my answer to the question. One of the things I always hear investors say though, like, and I think this was the premise of the question as well, is a lot of people say, oh, I want to leave a financial legacy for my kids. And that's why, like a lot of my clients come to me and they say, oh, I want to buy 5 houses because I want to leave like houses for my kids so they have a better life than I've had, et cetera, et cetera. But when people say that about kids, like most people listening and watching to this, Tyron, they're well above the poverty line. Like they're not in financial ruins. They've got a roof over their heads, got fed. Their kids' norm is just going to be one level away. So then when they have kids, their next norm is going to be, oh, I want to give them 5 houses and they want to keep stepping up that way. Like, of course, like you want a baseline of property. So you want like 1 or 2 properties where there's always a roof over your heads and you've got some financial stress taken away. But for me, it's relative. I don't like when people say I want to leave a financial future for my kids because, again, it's all relative. Like we're a wealthy, most people in Australia, we are a very wealthy country and there's not many people below the poverty line.
Yeah, I think this will be one of the hardest ones I'm going to answer as well. Because as you said, there's no right or wrong answer.
On my discovery calls with clients, one of the kind of initial questions I asked them was, if I just gave you $5 million cash right now, what would you be doing? And then that strips back what their real kind of goal is or what they're trying to achieve. Because most of the time it's a simple answer. It's I want to go travel the world or want to spend more time with my kids or want to work on a passion project or something like that. It's really, I'll go back to my law firm job and work 12 hours a day kind of thing. So it takes away that. And you can always scale it to the person. Some people it's $1 million, some people it's $10 million. And then that'll get the premise of what makes them happy. And then that'll guide me for if I have to build on my passive income. If they say travel the world, cool. You can travel the world for 50 grand a year if you want. Let's aim for that.
Yeah, I guess probably that, having the 1 million or 5 million goal, it's never ending, is it? Like, where do you stop and where do you start? Like, I've got one of the richest men in Australia's client, Harry Trickerboff. He's been a client now for over 25 years. And he doesn't need the money. He's still buying sites that go for 10 years and he's 91. 90. Talk about the definition of optimism.
The thing is with financial freedom, at least you've got the choice of how much you want to do it. You can be like, cool, I want to grow this nest egg of a business, but still, like I've worked from 15 countries in the last year. Like I can still do that because money is not the object.
Surely that's the goal, Steve, isn't it? Like, surely that your clients look at you and go, well, if you can run your, 15 countries you said, if you run your business like that, I want to work with you because you've got systems in place. I would have thought it'd be, about benefit. These days, especially post-COVID, who goes in to see a property buyer or a quantity surveyor these days?
It's almost like I thought it was going to be the opposite when I told people I was working from the UK. They were going to be like, oh, I don't want to work with you. Most people, they say, yep, that's exactly what I want. How make me have that life. And then they kind of build trust. And also, like, do you really trust the guy who's 50 years old, who has $10 million in the bank, who's working 9 till 9 in the office in Sydney, slaving away? Like, is he really that caring of your future wealth if he's still squirreling away? So I get that kind of, people sense that I'm not trying to sales them.
All right, up to number 9. Now, I'm not sure if we answered it, but let's give it a go. What does success look like to you, Steve?
Yeah, okay. So what does success look like for me? Like, yeah, we sort of just answered it, but it's a good question. Like, I'll read it. I'll go over what we just said. So like over the years, like similar to you, as I earn more money, like I thought that would bring more happiness. Like I thought once I got 3 properties, I'd be happy. Then once I got 10, I'd be happy. Then when I got 20, my happiness was actually going down every property that I accumulated because you kind of get that weird thinking, feeling like, oh, I should be happy. I'm getting wealthier. But to be honest, I got more excited about my first 3 properties. Like that was I'm doing really well. I kind of go there. Then same thing as I get wealthier and wealthier, me making 10 grand seemed like a huge deal. And I got really excited about that. Then it went to 100 grand. I'm like, okay, I got to make 100 grand per year. Then get that. now it's going by a factor of 10. Like for me to be happy, I've got to make $1 million in a year. So for the same enjoyment, I'm not getting any more kind of joy, and it's getting harder and harder to achieve. So like for me, success just means being true to yourself. Like it doesn't have to be both. It can come down to happiness. Can find a passion that makes you happy. If your passion makes you money, cool, even better. But like, what's an example? Like one of my happiest friends, he's actually a barber. So he works for 6 months and then he goes and travels the world for 6 months. So I only get him 6 months of the year, and he's been doing that the last 10 years. He's the happiest guy I know, and he's got 0 investments, and he's going to be stuffed at retirement, but he's going to have a bloody good 60 years.
Okay, up to the final question, number 10. And I guess this is what a bit of the crux of what this whole podcast is about is, leaving something for my daughter, a book hopefully that she can go back on, or your kids. And one of the big questions is not how to lose money. How don't you lose money? And Warren Buffett is quoted as saying, rule number 1, investing, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. But what he didn't say was, how do you not lose? He didn't give us a playbook. So how do you not lose money, Steve?
Unpopular opinion on this one, Tyron. I'm actually against the quote. I actually think, and we sort of alluded to it at the start of the conversation, you should be able to lose money in the younger years. Try things, learn from them, but you have to learn from it. Like I said, start a business, put some money in the shares, put some money in property, try some things while you've got the bank of mum and dad to fall back on and you're kind of low risk. However, but like I said, to make money, and this is what I believe he's referring to with the quote, is focus on the long term. So as long as you're buying like something with a finite resource and you're playing the long term game, you might lose in the short term, but long term you'll be all right. But I've got nothing wrong with learning from mistakes. Like that's how you can scale.
Now, I love that you turned that upside down. Now, there's something I didn't tell you, Steve. There's a bonus question. Question number 11. I'm going to do this to each one's specialisation. So with you, I've obviously picked commercial property, whether you're residential and commercial buyer. But there's something, whenever I want to buy a commercial property, there's one thing that's been worrying me, or that I wanted to see if I could kind of circumnavigate or limit the downside risk of it. And that's with the option of the lease. So say I was to buy a commercial property and it had a 5+5 lease, right? For those of you who don't know, that means you have a 5-year beginning term and a 5-year option after. And the option is up to the tenant to renew that option, not as you, the landlord. So let's say you're in the first term of that lease, say it's only 2 years in. Is there any strategy or tactic that you can employ as a prospective buyer to see whether, that tenant will actually uptake the option?
You've just got to incentivize the tenant. So this is where being a good property manager or having a good property manager will come into play. Most of the time, the tenant won't want to get kicked out of the property. Like that's their bread and butter and their livelihood. They want to be there long term, but they want to get a good deal. So if you emotionally and financially need that security that they're going to take up an option, have a conversation with them. I've done that on many properties where I've asked them to take up another lease. So say, look, we're happy to sign another 5-year lease post this one. And you can offer them incentives. Say, look, instead of giving you 5% rental increases, I'll give you 2% for a few years. So that way they see benefit there. Funnily enough, the options, even though they benefit the owner of the property, they're actually for the tenant. It's for the tenant to get some form of security. They're not going to be kicked out. So like if you're, say it's a retail one, it's a hairdresser, they've spent $100,000 fitting it out like a hairdresser. They don't want to get to the end of the 5-year lease and then you'd be like, nah, stuff you, you're out, I'm putting someone else in. And then they've got to uproot their business and move somewhere else. So most businesses want to stay there. So you just work with them, give and take, and then long term you can both basically reciprocate their kind of rewards.
Well, that brings us to the end of 10 with Ty, or 11 with Ty. Anyway, thanks, Steve, so much for your wonderful answers to the questions. Good luck with the baby. It's a trip that you're about to go on, and it's a wonderful trip. So how can people reach out to you, Steve?
There's not that many Steve Palises, which is good. So you can just type in Steve Palise. But PaliseProperty.com is my website. I'm on all the socials and stuff, but I'm very responsive. So if you send me a message, I'll get back to you within a day. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Looking forward to the finished product.
And just a quick update on the baby situation. Stephen and Lisa welcomed a beautiful baby girl named Ria into the world. Many congratulations to you all.
Can with Ty is brought to you by Washington Brown, the property depreciation expert.